Alright, so just a quick video on how to do an install for these Vigor air suspension air shocks for the Escalade or the GM products. So they sent me these to do this little install video real quick. So we'll go step by step. It's not that hard to do. And we'll get zoomed in here and look at the tools and see what all we need to do this work. Alright, so to do this install for these air shocks, it's really not that difficult. We're going to need a jack and a jack stand. We're just going to do one wheel at a time, so we'll just raise this one up, do this shock, put everything back together, and then we'll do the other side, so we don't have too much worry about it falling off the jack stands that way. But tools wise, you don't need a whole lot. We need a 21 millimeter to get the bolts off the top and bottom of the shock, a ratchet to do the same, breaker bar just in case, because we're going to take the lugs off. And we need a little bit of petroleum jelly to lubricate the seals when we put them back on. Most likely, if you're in a rusty area, those bolts are going to be a little bit difficult to get off for the shock. So we might need to put a little bit of oil on them or some WD-40 or something like that. I'm going to use some air tools to make it a little bit easier on me. And that's really about it, other than something to check for leaks once we get it installed, just to make sure everything is working. So we'll start with these shocks, and then we'll do a separate video for the compressor. That way, if you got to change them all out, you can watch both videos and get it all done. Alright, so we got our jack in place, and what we got to do is lift up on this lift point. So there's one lift point right up above the jack there, but we don't want to lift the tire all the way off the ground just yet, because what we're going to do is have to break the lug nuts loose, and we want to have the tire on the ground in order to do that, because it makes it a lot easier. So with some of the weight off of it, we can go ahead and get our breaker bar, and we can break these free. There we go. Now by freeing those up, makes it a lot easier to get them to come loose. Tire's still on the ground, so now we can raise it on up and take the tire off. So at this point, let's go ahead and slide our jack stand in. We'll just leave the jack under there. We got it on the stand, and we got the wheel free. So now we can take the wheel off and change out the shock. One thing, note of caution, don't stick your hands in here and try to grab it. Always just hit it on the outside, because if you put your hands in there, it's liable to catch your knuckles under something. So, you just bonk it. And if you want to, you can take your foot and slide it up under it and slide it over. That way you don't have any risk of cutting those knuckles up when you're taking that big old tire. And as you can see, I'm running 22s on this thing, so the suspension gets a really good workout on my Escalade, because I got some really big tires. Alright, so next up, we got to take the liner out of here in order to access the top of the shock, but you can already see the shocks right here. So it's going to have a bolt on the bottom and a bolt up top. We got an air fitting right here we got to take loose, and then we got a little electrical connection. So really not that hard to do, so we just got to take a bunch of screws out. There we go. So it should be all the screws. It just pops out and holds that piece together right there. Like that. Just one of those little pop guys. So we got all of this loose. Now we just got a couple of little vanity ones that sit right there. So that's where you need a little tool. So you can just grab them and just wiggle them out of there. There we go. Those little guys, those little Christmas tree things are kind of tough. Alright, so with the inner fender out of the way, you can see the whole air shock right here. And so it's just held on with a bolt at the top, bolt at the bottom, and then we got the air line that goes to the air suspension, and then the electrical connection. So in order to get it off, we want to start by taking off the electrical connection. And the vehicle doesn't have the ignition on right now, so it's not going to know if I disconnect this. As long as I reconnect it before I start it back up, then it's not going to throw any codes. So then next up is the airline, and so it's got this little wire clip that holds it on there, so you just have to turn it sideways like that, and so that gets it so it's not holding anymore, and then you just pull and you can wiggle the connection out. So there you go. So I still had a little air in mine because they were still aired up. So now we got that loose, and if you look, all it is a little spring clip, and then inside of here is the little O-rings that connect up and seal up to it. So we got that loose. So now we just need to take the bolts loose and we'll be able to drop that thing out of there. So this is where our 21 millimeter comes in. So all we want to do is just get a wrench on it and see if we can't break it free up top and get it loose, and then we'll go to the bottom. Alright, so to get to this top one, we got our cheater bar. And just check it and see if it'll even rotate. It's probably going to spin the head. So we can check it. Yeah, so we can move it. But it's probably just spinning the head on the back side. So you probably need to get something like an extension with another ratchet. And we're going to go in there behind it and put that up on the head. That way we can keep it from spinning and we can take that bolt out. So we got to slide up underneath it. There we go. So now we got our other ratchet on the inside, and you can't see it, but it's hanging down in the back here. And so now, when I loosen that nut, that ratchet's going to hold it in place. Alright, so that's the most difficult of the two. So the top bolt is definitely the most difficult of the two. The bottom bolt is pretty easy. That's where we get our open end wrench and put it on there, and then let that just swing down and hit the jack. Alright, so then there is the lower one. So if it pushes out, that's good. If it doesn't push out, then what you can do is get a screwdriver and put it underneath this perch right here. And we'll wiggle that bolt out. So there's the lower. We've already got the upper loose, so I'm just going to slide it out. You can take a screwdriver and just push the bolt out of the shock. And out comes the shock. So there's the old shock. And now we're ready to install the new one. So there's the upper bolt. So it has a tendency to fall down into the perch. So if you lose it, you'll know it fell down into the little perch mount there. Yeah, so that upper bolt right there is really hard to get back up in behind there. So you can just barely reach it with your fingers. You can get around underneath the vehicle and get it, but if you can just keep it right on the edge of it, and it just fell down in the hole. We're going to have to push that back through the shock when we put it in there. So it just fell down inside the perch, and so now I got to get it and push it back out. But no big deal. We'll get that back out of there, and then we'll be ready to install the shock. Alright, so we are ready to install our new shock. And so what we got to do, they're expanded right now, and if you squash them, they'll squash down. But what we want to do is put it inside of the brake line, and then we're going to connect the upper one first. So let's go ahead and push that bolt back. Get it right to the edge of it so it doesn't fall off and go down there again. And then bring the shock up, and hopefully get the shock to go up on there without losing the bolt. Like that. So there we go. So now we got the top one on. So let's go ahead and put its nut on there just to make sure that that bolt doesn't fall back off and go back down in the perch, because that gets kind of annoying after a while. Alright, so we got the top bolted in with the nut on there, And so now we got to get the bottom up onto the little perch right there. And you can see it's a lot longer because it's extended. A little difficult to get it up there because you're going to have to compress it, but one thing that'll help is to remove that little yellow cap, because that's going to let the air come out for you. Now to get it up on the perch, easiest thing I've found to do is to take 2 of these little wooden shims that you can get at the hardware store and just set them down in there. And what we're going to do is set it on the wooden shim, and then we're going to take the wooden shim out. And so go ahead and put one in that way and one in this way, and then when we get ready to mount it up on there, we can raise it up and then slide these around until we can get that bolt put in there. Alright, so to get this thing raised up, what you want to do is get a screwdriver or something and put it in the hole. Now it's going to hit the wheel if you're not careful, so you may have to jiggle it a little bit, or you can turn it around this way maybe, but you'll see here in a second. So put your screwdriver in there and then just raise up on the screwdriver and set it up onto the perch. Let me get my hands in there. And you want to pick it up higher than the perch, so when you set it on there, it closes back down. There we go, so we got it at least resting on it. Now we got to get it up a little bit to get it onto the wooden shims. So we'll have to get a screwdriver or something to put in there. We can go below it and raise up on it and then set it onto the shim. Let's raise it up and see if we can get our wooden shims in there. Hold it up. Right there. So now it slides in further, but that's okay. We got the wooden shims in there. We can always back it back out and then get the height right with the shims to put the bolt in. So all we do is pick back up on it and slide it back toward the hole. There we go. So now we got the bolt started. So let's slide the shims out. And there we go. Alright, so now we got our bolt back in and our nut, so now we just need to tighten those up, reattach our electrical connector, and reattach our air line, and then put it all back together and we'll have this side done. So let's go ahead and get that finished up and we'll be in good shape. There we go. Alright, so all we got left to do is reconnect up the electrical and the air line. So the electrical is easy. All you do is just pop him on there until that snaps. There you go. Now for the air line, what you want to do is actually take the hose loose from the elbow and slide the inside of it out, because it's got 2 little O-rings in there. And so what you want to do is get those to come out of the elbow by pushing on it right there. And so as you can see, there's 2 little O-rings right on the end there. And so what we want to do is lube those up. So get us a little petroleum jelly, and we're going to put a little bit of petroleum jelly on them just to make sure they're slippery in for the new connector there. And to install it, you just slide the elbow back, put those little guys in there, and they'll push in, and then turn the elbow around and lock the elbow down onto them. That way you know for sure both O-rings went in there. You can see right there is the 2 O-rings. So I push it until the O-rings go up inside of it. And then I turn the connector, and when I hit it, it pops and it's in place. So then you just take the little hose, loop it back over like that, and there you go. You got your little connector put back on. So that's pretty much it for the install on these. Now we just put our inner liner back in, and we'll switch over to the other side, and we'll do it in a high speed just so you can see how it goes, but I'll do the very same thing in high speed. So let's get our inner liner back on, our wheel put back on, and we'll switch to the other side. Alright, so that's pretty much it on how to install the shocks. Not too bad. The driver's side is a ton easier than the passenger side because it's easier to get that bolt up inside that perch right there. Everything else seems to work about the same way, but I'm not going to put the inner liner back in because I'm going to make the other video on how to install the compressor. So we'll start there so we can see it. What I'm going to do right now is go ahead and put the wheel back on without the inner liner, and then I'll start up the vehicle, and then we'll check these and make sure these aren't leaking. I'll show you how to do that, and then that would pretty much be it for the install for the shocks. So let's get our wheel put back on, and then we'll come back and fire this up and test those shocks and see if they air up. Alright, so we are back down on the ground temporarily. So I got my wheel back on and everything's all hooked up. So what I'm going to do is go put the key in the ignition, and when I start the vehicle up, what it ought to do is energize the pump. Let's fire it up and see if it lifts up our air shocks. Now that I got air in it, I'm going to spray some soap bubbles and make sure that the fittings aren't leaking. So let's spray us some soap bubbles all over it. And we look really good. No leaks on that side. I'll go over and check the other side to make sure too, but it looks like these Vigor Air ones are sealing up good, and we did a successful install. Well, alright, we will leave it at that, and everything looks good. So the next video will be changing out the compressor. Although this compressor works, we'll do an install for Vigor's compressor for these air shocks, and then we'll be done. Alright, so there you go. Quick video on how to install these Vigor air shocks to replace out some that are worn or busted, or in my case the top is broke free and it's no longer doing anything. But not too hard at all, just takes a little time, no bloody knuckles, just a little dirty. And if you're also looking to change out the compressor, there's another video out there on a how to change out the Vigor air compressor. Well, alrighty, well thanks for watching.